one of the things that I really like about listening to Peter, and I think has been one of the reasons that I've dove so deep into so much of his content around all the different aspects of health, is that a lot of the way that he approaches things also kind of supports my biases.
Hmm.
And so I think I've mentioned this to you before, but one of my favorites has been that, like, throughout my life, I've never been the cleanest eater.
Yeah.
I've always kind of taken some freedom with the things that I put in my body, but I've justified it by saying that, well, I exercise a lot, and so my body needs this food. And so one
Or
side
at
of that
least could
argument,
get away with it.
you could get away with it. I mean, one side of the argument could say that that is the neuroses, that you're basically like eating, you're cheating, and then you're exercising to
Hmm.
outdo the cheat, which in some ways I think was true in my past. um but what I really 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 like, that exercise does seem to be this sort of like get out of jail free card for a
Hmm.
lot of mistakes that you can make in life. It's like you look at the studies now that are referenced on, well, if you have a really shitty night of sleep, my default before would have been like, oh, I had a shitty night of sleep, I feel awful, I should give myself grace and just take a rest day. But you look at what, glucose numbers look like on across studies when you have poor sleep, and they're awful. Like glucose goes up 10 points or something just by having poor sleep.
Yeah.
But apparently you can exercise even though you're sleep depleted, and suddenly everything kind of normalizes again.
Right.
And so that can kind of be extrapolated out to a lot of things with nutrition or subpar aspects of your lifestyle that seem to be benefited just by the fact that you're doing various forms of exercise across the day.
Yeah, I think it allows you to get away with a lot, right? I mean, there's always stories of like athletes who just eat a ton of quote unquote junk and then like their blood markers are fine and everything's pretty healthy because of that. I think in general, it's something that again, it's not like a blanket statement, like if you exercise, you can just do whatever you want, but it does allow you to get away with a lot. I think in terms of his realistic views on things, like you said, it's something that you and I spoke about. Do we need to be at that top 1%, or is a lot of this good enough? Like if you're eating, like that's something I've even found with like blood work of my own is, you know, there was a period where I was eating significantly more junk, and not like candy and cookies all day, but like, I'd go out and like order Indian food or get like a lot of Chipotle, which I don't think is necessarily bad, but like things that I just wasn't tracking, I wasn't on it as much. Nothing really blood work wise changed at all. Because again, I was the same weight, I was doing the same amount of activity, I was still sleeping well. And I think you do get some of these people where they act like food is going to be the answer to everything. And again, going back to my previous statement, Peter Attia 5 years ago would have said this. Like this is actually one of
Yes.
the reasons I don't even go back and listen to all the earliest episodes, because it's going to be a different viewpoint. I think nutrition is super important, but I think once you've had these pillars, like these big pillars taken care of, I'm not sure it matters so much that like everything is perfectly dialed in there. And again, that's based on my own experience, clients' experience, my blood work, their blood work, and the research now, like the good
Yeah.
research on it.
Yeah. I agree, man. I haven't seen any changes at all really across a decade of doing blood work, between periods when dieting and eating almost entirely clean food with lots of fruits and vegetables, or periods where I'm bulking and taking a lot of freedom with the quality of the calories that I put in my body. It really doesn't seem to move the needle a whole ton. And in some ways it actually seems like reverse T3 and like other stress, like signs of oxidative stress, seem to be worse when I'm eating better. And that's probably a result of energy balance more than it is a result of
So I
quality
was
of
going to
food.
mention, yeah.
But like, that is interesting though, that energy balance seems to play such an important role in the way that your blood work comes across, almost even more so than quality of food at some level.
Definitely more than quality of food in my experience. I mean, again,
Yeah.
we're not. I'm sure if you go to the extremes, like I ate no protein and like all high fructose corn syrup, like obviously. But if we're talking about like similar macronutrients and everything like
Yeah.
that, I think it's extremely similar. And speaking about the importance of energy balance, again, this isn't to like knock these people, but as people like you and I who are so in like the fitness world, two things that I've found, I don't know, questionable or just surprising. Peter had put out I think it was a podcast and a post on these GLP-1 agonists. And what they do is essentially is blunt hunger. One of the side effects because of that is nausea. And the post was basically to say, oh, but look, yes, they lost all this weight, but they also lost all this lean body mass. So it's not like this panacea. It's not for everybody. And my immediate thought that I saw other people say too is like, well, yeah, that's going to happen to anybody who's in a big deficit like that and isn't working out. Like, of course, like you could just have somebody on the perfect diet and they're going to lose a lot of lean body mass if they're not training at all. Let's see the study on the GLP-1 agonist who is also weight training. Would it be any worse? Like, I don't see any, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't know if there's any reason that it would be inherently catabolic more than just a deficit.
Yeah.
But that's something maybe you and I would think of, but sometimes some of the practitioners I think wouldn't, because they just look at this like one aspect.
Yeah.
And I found this with protein too. I mean, Peter has said, if you're intermittent fasting, you're basically almost guaranteed to miss your protein target, which was a shocking statement. As somebody who's done intermittent fasting since 2011, I can easily get in 200 grams of protein in a day doing so. And Rhonda Patrick was just saying on their recent podcast, like, oh, like I could never get 1 gram per pound of body weight. Like that's so much. I'm just like, what? Again, it's just you and I have been doing this since we were like teenagers. So it's hard to relate to that. When I hear people say they can't get 130 grams of protein a day, I'm just like, that's just mind blowing. Like yesterday, I wasn't even thinking about it. I was just eating what I wanted. I had 250 grams of protein. So.
Yeah. Well, we naturally probably lean towards foods that are higher in protein. But this is actually another avenue in which Peter Attia's philosophy on things kind of supports my biases. And so like you hear a lot of people in the vegetarian or in the longevity community talk about how spiking mTOR is going to basically lead to early death. And then you hear Peter address that. And it's exactly as I've always, and you have always perceived it, which is that you need to have a certain level of strength and muscle mass to ensure that you don't become frail in old age. And that when you kind of make sense of the studies of, okay, you have these studies that are looking at decreasing mTOR as much as possible so that you live long. Okay, great. But then you have to middle that with the fact that these people have such little muscle mass and such little strength that they're A, not able to live a quality of life as they get older, and B, they're susceptible to falls and other things that could more early end life.
Totally. Yeah. And again, I know I'm kind of pointing out a few of these things that I disagree with, but on the whole, I very much agree with his points and stuff like that, where like, yeah, like you're definitely going to be outweighing it. I mean, to think that, I mean, if you're trying to minimize mTOR, you're basically saying, okay, don't eat much protein, don't exercise, and just be this frail older person. Like, obviously that's not going to be the answer. So,
well, because it worked in monkeys, right? Because like, I mean,